Started, you guys. Jen, if you could go to the next slide. Welcome, everybody. We're here for Fun for All, Inclusive and Risky Play. This is a great presentation. We all know, everybody here that is attending and everyone in the group knows that risky play helps to increase self-esteem, helps decrease conflict sensitivity, and it helps with problem-solving skills. But how do we include this into a splash pad? And how does risky play look like when you have an inclusive splash pad? How do we include everybody in that risky play? So today we're going to talk about incorporating both risky play and inclusive play in these spaces to keep children safe. Our approach is going to encourage participation by both visual and verbal learning methods and critical thinking and fostering safe play while also doing free play. So we're here today. Most of you are familiar with Waterplay's Design and Spec team. We're a group of really dedicated specialists who we focus on the design community and creating these innovative and engaging, inclusive recreation spaces. So our goal is to work with you, the design community. And my name is Melinda Pearson. I am the Design and Spec Manager. I'm also here today with Jeff Scobie, who a lot of you who have worked with and have provided lots of technical specialist support, and Jen Mahan, our client service specialist. I'm also here with Jen and Marissa, who are going to lead you through this really great master class today. So I'd like to hand it over to them.
Perfect. I'm Jennifer Lazzarini. I have been with Waterplay for just over a year and a half now. I have about 10 years of play industry experience, and it's fun to be part of the Design and Spec team where I get to work with design firms like yours on a daily basis to create all of these special spaces for our communities. And Marissa, I'll turn it over to you.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. My name's Marissa Noonan. Some of you Texas attendees may know me. I am in the DFW area, and at Waterplay, I'm the Design and Spec Specialist. I've also been at Waterplay for about a year and a half now. A little bit about me, my past professional education is from Louisiana Tech University, where I received my master's degree in architecture, and I have experience working in an architectural firm as well as a playground design firm. And I'm really passionate about play spaces and understanding how to design with success. And I love what I do here at Waterplay. So today we're going to kind of touch on a lot of topics. Some of the learning objectives are going to be to identify how to design for inclusive play. We're also going to look at how to incorporate risk by defining and reframing risky play behaviors. We're going to also learn how to purposely design play zones that allow children to fail, but also encourage them to move forward as a positive part of that learning progression. And then lastly, we're going to identify just thoughtful design elements to increase risky play that facilitate perseverance and maximize inclusive play value for all ages and abilities. So really combining that inclusive and risky play together. To start things off, we are going to dive into inclusive play and learn about the current state of inclusivity and universal design, and begin to identify how to design for all ages and abilities. So get involved, pull out your phones, scan this QR code. We want to figure out what you guys think of when you hear the first thing of what you think of when you hear inclusive play. You can also click here on this link that we just posted and send in your responses through this Mentimeter. It's going to create a word cloud of all of your answers, hopefully, and we'll be able to, compare and see how your answers compare with other people's, these buzzwords that are coming about when we think of inclusive play. So I'll just give everyone a minute to, post those answers in there. I don't know if I see any answers just quite yet. Oh, it looks like we have 3 responses, so that's good. Thank you guys for getting involved. Fun, everyone, and fairness is definitely big. We want everyone to have fun in those inclusive play everyone to be able to have the right to be involved. And fairness is a great one. I love that word. No matter what your background is, no matter what your ability is, collaborative, all abilities, like I just said, absolutely, these are great. I see another fair in there, fair and fairness. Fun for all, definitely a good topic. That's what we've decided to name this presentation. So that's definitely associated with inclusive play. Welcoming, I do really like that word. I definitely think of welcoming when I think of inclusive play. Engaging for all kids, and everyone's experience matters in the park. Those are all great examples. Awesome. Okay, I think we're good to move on, yeah. Okay, so let's look at the definition of inclusive. What is inclusivity? What is accessibility? And what is universal design? When we hear ADA or accessible design, the goal is to meet the needs of people with disabilities. And when we hear inclusive design, the goal is to create environments that are accessible and usable to the widest range of individuals, regardless of their abilities or disabilities. And then when we hear universal design, that goal is to enable and empower a diverse population of improving human performance, health, wellness, and social participation. So you can kind of see how those definitions get wider and carry over into each one. So it's really just thinking about in these aquatic play spaces, once a child can access the play space, what kind of experience do they have there? So looking at a little bit of background on inclusivity, 1 billion or 15% of the world's population experience some form of disability. And disability is actually more prevalent in it's more prevalent in developing countries. So unfortunately today, individuals are still experiencing this inclusion from traditional play experiences. But the good news is that can easily be avoided through thoughtful design in that design process. Another way we can, combat this is park and rec agencies. They specifically design and market programming and activities targeted to different segments of their community. So some park and rec agencies are more likely than others to offer inclusive programming and activities. For example, suburban areas are more likely to offer specific programming for individuals with a physical or cognitive disability, where park and rec agencies in urban areas are more likely to offer programming and activities geared to multicultural, racial, or ethnic communities. But actually, only 2 in 5 park agencies have that formal inclusion policy that ensures all members of the community can access and enjoy all that Park Recs has to offer. So there's definitely room for improvement there. Looking at splash pads and aquatic design, they are very naturally inclusive. We have that firm, level surfacing, no trip hazards, no entry barriers. They have play zones that offer different levels of stimulation in each area, feature placement that allows for multiple users to play at the same time. Zero depth, has no standing water, and requires no prior skill level of swimming. Clear sightlines for caretakers, and also water is naturally inclusive. It's calming and soothing and something that we are drawn to as humans. Let's get started on the 7 principles of universal design. These are world-renowned. You could have heard them by now in the design industry, and they really just map out a guideline for us to include and achieve that universal design. So equitable use is design for people with diverse abilities. Flexibility in use is design that accommodates for a wide range of individual preferences. And simple and intuitive use is design that is easy to understand regardless of the user's knowledge or experience. Perceptible information is that design that communicates the necessary information. Tolerance for error is minimizing those hazards in the design. And low physical effort is design that can be comfortable with minimum fatigue involved. And size and space for approach and use is looking at the project as a whole and its surroundings. So the goals of these 7 principles of universal design are kind of taking the principles a step deeper. They guide us in designing a splash pad, and these goals were developed by the University of Buffalo Centers for Inclusive Design. So this just really helps us expand the Universal's design original focus to include social participation and health and wellness. And these goals consist of body fit, which is accommodating for a wide range of body sizes and abilities. It includes comfort, cultural appropriateness, awareness, social integration, which is treating all groups with dignity and respect, wellness, personalizations through incorporating opportunities or choice and individuality, and understanding. So on this next slide, we're going to look at the 7 principles of universal design and kind of apply them to one of our very own aquatic designs. So in this Splashpad, equitable use is applicable because it's a zero-depth design. It's on a flat surface, allowing for kids, caretakers of all diverse abilities to use from the start. Flexibility in use is incorporated into the design by the different play zones, the variety of water textures, and many other things. Just because a kid is capable of something does not mean that that's what they're comfortable with. And having all these different play zones really allows for kids' individual preferences and ability and that flexibility in use. Simple and intuitive use is our puddles we put into this design. It's easy to understand this product because it's mimicking a puddle that naturally occurs in nature. Perceptible information is our activators in this design. Tolerance for error is an example of applying texture to the walkable features so there's no slip and potential for harm. Low physical effort, features like the water table that, they don't have to be a Ninja Warrior course for kids to have fun. They can have that low physical effort. And size and space and approach for use, that shade, that seating that we've applied here, the open spaces for all ages and abilities and for all users. So looking a little bit more in depth, equitable use and flexibility in use, these achieve the goal of body fit, spacing out our features to allow for that diverse body sizes and capabilities. That cultural appropriateness goal, our themes, and allowing, always being mindful and respectful when adding themes to the Splashpad that naturally fit and just make sense, like nature, nautical, and wildlife. And personalization, having more than one way to play with the feature so kids can really create their own identity. Simple and intuitive use and perceptible information. The understanding of the activators and how the Splashpad is sequenced to turn off after 5 minutes, and that activator button needs to be pressed to turn it back on. And the perceptible information of how we lay out and organize the Splashpad into zones, areas that maybe kids are more comfortable with and allow them to have that awareness of where they go and where they play. And tolerance for error and low physical effort, eliminating those hazards so kids are not injured on the Splashpad. You see these kids sliding down the slide and onto these safety mats that we've designed for them. So there is no injury there. And size and space and approach for use, size and space and approach for use, adding parking, public buildings with restrooms or AC, and walkways or overspray areas that can achieve goals like awareness, wellness, and social integration. So how do we design for inclusive play? The goal is to accommodate different play habits and styles simultaneously so that everyone can play in one space. And we do this through creating specific environments that allow for inclusive play. So on this next slide, we're going to look at a chart that's kind of mapping out all these different environments and how they afford that inclusive play and fit into that inclusive category that we're trying to achieve. So ground level features, these afford that sensory rich play, that walking, jumping, rolling, running, bending, whatever they may be able to do with these ground level features. It gives them comfort and access. And you can do this through puddles, ground sprays, lily pads, and many other features. The multi-level features that have, a little bit more of height to them, they afford activities, gears, minimal mobility play if they're only able to use their upper body, STEM thoughts, and that still applies to that comfort and access category. Elevated surface, that affords height and perspective that they might not be used to. Flat and relatively smooth, this affords that high speeds, that running, rolling, gliding, crawling, however they may be able to use it in that space and access. Slopes and slides affords for sliding, another space and access. And enclosure and restrictions, I love this one. It's them getting lost and disappearing, not physically from their parents in a dangerous way, but more of in their mind and getting their own independence of being in their own world. So that no adult-led play also allows for that independence. And then a major environment for inclusivity to include is those site amenities. This affords relaxation, rest, and comfort, not only for the caretakers, but also the kids. So the inclusive play designs, they just have an enormous impact on the success of a facility. The attendance rates can go up and the community well-being will increase. So a thoughtful design can really increase safety, accessibility, and maximize play value. So this is why inclusivity is so important when designing aquatic play spaces. I am going to pass it over to Jen at this point to talk about risky play.
Perfect. Thank you, Marissa. So taking a little bit of a turn for a bit before we combine both risky play and inclusive play together is really taking a deep dive on inclusive play. So hopefully you guys are all still with us. We have another word cloud that we want to pop up. So feel free to go ahead and scan the QR code here, or Marissa has put the link on the top of the screen and you can click there and add your results in there as well. And I will follow along here. See what you guys have to say. Give it just a minute for it to start refreshing. Perfect, here we go. Play at my own pace. I like that one. I know, you know, the older my kids get, the more I start to realize that not as many of you guys have kids anymore, but risky play is one of those things that as a mom, I was always worried about when they were younger, and then realized that, you know, they play at their own pace. They start to really learn what they are capable of doing and how they want to do it. Providing that perception of risk is huge, right? It may not truly be risky, but to them, it's going to be something that might have a little bit of risk and adventure to it. Elevation changes, tightly packed. Yes, having too many things in one space so that it's, you know, again, we're going to talk a little bit more about what true risk is versus hazards, which Marissa touched on just a little bit. We don't want to provide hazards for them. We want to be able to provide risk. Giving them spaces to problem solve and grow. Untreated play environments, absolutely. Let's see if we have a couple more before we go on here. New, I like that, providing new spaces for kids to play in. Splashpads is a great way to provide some sort of new play for children. A lot of times kids that are, you know, 4 or 5 years old, they may have never been to a splash pad before. So a splash pad in itself is a new space, which might provide that element of risky play, teamwork. These are all great. The web link will stay up there for just a little bit if people want to add into it just a little bit along the way, and we can do final word clouds as well at the end. Share those with you guys. So let's go ahead and dive into the definitions of what play is. So play is an activity for amusement or recreation. It's typically something that is self-chosen and self-directed. It brings satisfaction from the process of actually playing, not the outcome of playing. So a little bit different than like a team sport where the outcome is we win or we lose. This is going to be really something that you're doing for the pure fun of being able to do it. Whereas risk is traditionally defined as the probability of something happening that will have a negative effect. It can also refer to the potential consequences of that event or not possibly knowing the outcome if you're going to do something. So let's now look at the definition specifically of what risky play is. So risky play is really combining those two terms, the risk and the play, and how we can achieve that. It provides a space that is thrilling and exciting, forms of play that involve risk of possible physical injury. But again, what we had said on the previous slide is these can be real or perceived. And that is the goal that we really want to achieve here, is the perceived risk. We don't want kids actually getting injured or hurt from hazards being in our splash pad spaces. These different kinds of risky play include providing situations with great heights. Think of great slides or climbing nets on playgrounds, and even in aquatic spaces, the big tall slides when you go into, an aquatic center. High speeds, dangerous tools, dangerous elements, rough and tumble play. If any of you guys have siblings, you're probably very familiar with what rough and tumble play is. And then disappearing or getting lost, which is something that Marissa had spoken to as well in inclusive play. These, while they can sound kind of scary, especially as a parent to a little one, are all spaces that we should provide to our kiddos so that they can actually learn and grow within their space, in their play spaces. So this slide should look very familiar. Marissa just shared it like 3 minutes ago, maybe at this point in time. And it's taking those same environments, the ground level features, multi-level features, elevated surfaces, and applying the risky play to those specific spaces as well. So you can see here, the affordances are slightly different. The categories are going to fall into those risky play categories, and then the aquatic elements might shift slightly as well. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper into each of these different environments as well. So before we do that, applying that same to that same splash pad here in Swan Park, we are going to be applying the different examples of risky play. So you can see here elevated surfaces. We're calling out the surf stones that we have down here in the play area. And that's just providing a space for kids to climb on something, sit on something, and enjoy something at a different level. The ground level features, this is providing a flat, smooth surface for kids to be able to play with ground sprays at different heights so that they can approach them at their comfort level. Multi-level features, the water ways that we have here is a great example of a multi-level features that kids can access it. If you're a little toddler, if you happen to be using a mobility device, or you're an adult, there's going to be different levels and platforms for you to be able to play with at your own risk. And then flat surfaces, this is really providing them that opportunity to run as fast as they want to jump, to kind of have races and hold experiments with their friends and their competitive advantages. And then enclosures or restrictions, again, that's that space for kids to hide. Putting something underneath an umbrella where kids can hide behind a shower of water and pretend that their parents can't see them. This is a great example of providing that risk for kids to be able to step away from that parent involvement. And then this entire space is truly a no adult-led play. Now, of course, if it's 102 out, parents are going to be out here playing too, but that's by choice, not because their toddler won't go out there without them. And that's what we want to be able to provide, is a space where kids can truly go out and play on their own. And then if parents want to be involved, they can be involved as well. So digging a little bit deeper into ground level features, these are great spaces that afford that jumping, rolling, balancing, crawling. Again, all of the things that Marissa had mentioned as well. It really encourages balancing here so that you can see on the puddle, that's a very uneven surface. Kids are going to jump on that or step on it, and it's going to move with them. It's going to deplete and the water is going to squirt out. So it provides multiple opportunities for them to really learn and grow their gross motor skills and body awareness in this space. And then multi-level features, this has a lot of different benefits. Mostly it does afford that ability to have competitive play. So you can see the kids there with the cannons. Can I squirt you? Can I reach you? Can I spray somebody that's walking by that is unexpecting it? As well as the multi-level features of the waterways, which I had discussed. It really provides that opportunity for kids to play at different levels, learn how to adjust the water features and the water flow, and also get their friends involved to see maybe, can I get the biggest puddle of water or make the most waterfall down as well. And then elevated surfaces. These come in many different looks and feels and can provide a lot of different elements of risk to it. But the biggest is it really does afford that height and perspective for kids to be able to climb up to different opportunities, to view the play space, to interact with the play space, and so forth. It encourages a lot of balancing and climbing capabilities so that kids really are using their entire body to access this. So you can see here we applied the surf stones. We do have activity towers that we could do on zero depth surfaces or in aquatic pools with like beach entries. And then also applying it into the natural elements such as the stairs coming down so that you have different levels of play within that natural playscaping for kids to really learn and grow. Again, this really contributes to gross motor skills and their body awareness. And then flat open spaces. This is truly one of the best ways to provide free play for our kids while they're out in what might look like a prescribed play environment, is just allowing them to run and behave how they want to, come up with their own ideas of what that space is supposed to be and what it's supposed to look like, have races to and from one element to another to see who can get to the cannon first or away from the mega soaker without getting wet. And it provides that ability to get those high speeds and make up games. It also teaches them how to self-regulate and engages that imagination. I have said multiple times in lunch and learn environments of working with you guys on designs, when you have just a brushed concrete surface, a kiddo is going to learn that if they run too fast and they slip and fall, it's not going to feel really pleasant. So they learn how to tone that down on their own. And if we're always in there involving ourselves, telling them, don't run, don't do this, they're not going to learn that on their own. Slopes and slides. This is another great way to afford that sliding and speed that kids really love to experiment with, and providing it into the splash pad in a way that is safe for them to engage with it versus them seeking out how to do it on their own. We see lots of spaces or kids now where they're taking seating spaces and trying to learn how to do their own sliding with skateboards and stuff like that. So being able to provide these into the spaces where kids are supposed to be doing it provides them with that same risk element, but in a very safe way for them to experience it. This is also a great way for them to learn new skills and have different kinds of adventure and fun on a splash pad. The other thing that I have been hearing a lot of is kids are taking, if you have a playground and a splash pad, they are taking that water from the splash pad area, bringing it over to the playground slide and creating their own water slides. So this is, again, making sure that we have the proper elements in place so that if they do slide down a water slide, they have the mat at the bottom of it so that we're not creating some kind of a hazard in that same space that we want to be a safe environment for them. Enclosures and restrictions. This is some great examples of how just disappearing behind a fountain of water or the mega soaker, kind of climbing underneath that umbrella, is really creating that kid's imagination that they're disappearing from the world. Maybe they're underneath a water tower and the water's coming down and they're hiding behind a waterfall. Things like that, where they can be perceived that their parents might not be able to see them and understand what they're doing, but really at the same time we are able to keep an eye on our little ones and make sure that they're safe from a distance. It encourages that imagination and the courage to be able to do something that might be a little intimidating or scary, because they do typically have to go underneath the water to be able to achieve this kind of enclosed space. It really teaches them that independence of getting out there and doing it on their own. And then adult-led play. Again, we had touched on this a little bit. We really want to make sure that kids have this space where they can go out and be on their own, feel creative, feel independent, and have a step away from their parents. I love seeing here the multiple ages of kids so that the little guys can look up to their older siblings possibly or older playmates for guidance and understanding and learn how to rely on each other instead of always having a parent there telling them how to interact and play with something. The peer-led engagement is exactly what we're looking for in this no adult-led play space. And the key here is that they're really learning their social skills, self-regulation again, and how to navigate spaces and situations that they might not be as familiar with, is a huge part of growing up in today's world that we all need to learn as adults as well. So the benefits of risky play. We actually there was a study done of a group of kids over 14 weeks. And we learned that their risk detection and competence levels had increased. Their self-esteem had increased and their conflict sensitivity had decreased. Relative to their pre-intervention, as well as the kids that were in the other control group, we really found a lot of these benefits came out of the out of the total stumble there, found out of the experiment that kids learn how to do all of these things. The benefits far outweigh the risks of having risky play available to our kids. And again, we're doing it in a way where it is still safe for them to enjoy risky play. It's just creating those environments for them to step up to it. So how to design for risky play? Really, this comes down to making sure that we understand the zoning, which we'll look at a little bit deeper in a minute, but making sure that we zone properly so that kids can go through what I call graduated risk in the space that they're doing things in. The visual elements, such as graphics and colors. Think of designing things in that might be a pirate ship or a shark to help ignite that imagination of the kids, but still leave it open enough for them to maybe pretend that they're Ariel under the sea instead of a shark under the sea. Including various spray types and textures and heights, so that when kids are touching various features and elements, it's always going to be feeling slightly different. A mist spray is going to feel very different than a mega soaker spray, and having kids learn how to understand that. And then placement of features, this is actually one of the super important things. We want to make sure, one, that we are complying with ADA, but we also want to make sure that we're not introducing hazards. So we're spacing things far enough apart to where if a child is running away from a mega soaker, they're not going to turn around and hit a different feature at the same time. So this really gives them that adequate space to run, jump, hide, and things like that. Really is what we're doing is providing the opportunity to get to know their strengths, learn from their mistakes, and find new ways to be interested and creative. It's giving them the opportunity to truly grow. So hopefully you guys are all still awake, because we do have a pop quiz coming up. So Marissa is going to pop onto the screen here a poll for you guys. And we'll give you a few minutes to go ahead and answer this question. But we are curious, how many of you know the quote, "I have not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that it won't work"? And who had said that? I see a couple popping in here. So far, so good. We have 4. So we're just about halfway there. See if a couple more can get their answer in before we end the voting here. So far, it looks like most of you guys are getting the right answer. Awesome. So for those of you that have answered Thomas Edison, that is the correct answer. And I just really love the quote in general, because it truly is, we need that ability to take a moment to try something. And we don't typically try and get it right the very first time. Think of that toddler that's going from crawling to walking. If we gave up the first time we fell down, none of us would be adults walking around this earth. We would all be crawling still, which would be quite entertaining, but very not effective. So great job. And then let me just reshare my screen real quick. Perfect. Confirm you guys can see my screen okay? Awesome. I am going to turn it over to Marissa to introduce combining inclusive and risky play.
Thanks, Jen. Okay, so now we're going to look at combining that inclusive and risky play. And to start that, that quote from Thomas Edison is a great example of how, we're celebrating failure and embracing it as part of that positive progression of learning for kids. So looking at failure in play as more of learning, we'll start to look at helicopter parenting, which is simply when parents or caretakers want to make sure that everything works out perfectly for their kids. This hinders a child's development and doesn't allow them to have that child-free play. They also don't learn cause and effect. So, for example, running on concrete. This can be really scary, especially on slippery concrete. Parents will oftentimes hold their kid's hand and, walk with them, or if they did go too fast and slip, they'd pick them back up immediately. And this just makes them not able to learn that they have to be more cautious on those slippery surfaces, because if they do, they may slip and fall and scrape their knee. So it also shows them that someone else fixes things and they never learn to struggle. Another example is tall slides on play structures. Kids oftentimes are brave enough to go up the play structure, but then they get to the highest point and they're too scared to slide down. And parents can get involved and they begin to interrupt that process by fixing things for them. They'd climb the structure, grab their hand, and take them back down, and they never learn to fail. And in order for us to succeed, we have to fail a few times first. It's a progression of failure, 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 then success. So next slide, we'll see two pictures of adult-led play versus child-free play, which we've talked a lot about in this presentation. But as you can see in these photos, the adult-led play is a great recreation facility, but there is helicopter parenting in place here because of the risk of kids exploring and venturing off and into the deep end, which has the risk of drowning. So when there is a risk, parents are more likely to stand close to their kids, and this caters to that adult-led play. Versus the child-free play, as you can see on the Splashpad, parents have little to no perceived risk. They're able to step back and watch their kids from afar on the park bench, really allowing kids to have their own independence and achieve that self-chosen play. They begin to set their own boundaries, choose their own adventures, and just discover their own interests and skills on their own. So they're able to accomplish that self-chosen play, and we've incorporated risky and inclusive play on these play spaces together, so it all comes together for them.
Perfect. I am going to take it back over to talk a little bit deeper about the zoning. So really quickly, on the first one, we dug deep into our different ways of zoning here at Waterplay. But really quickly to recap that, in case you weren't on the first one, is what Waterplay does is zone based on cognitive abilities. Typically, our development and discovery zones, we combine together quite often as far as providing that really beginning entryway for kids to approach a splash pad. This is going to be very low to ground, predictable ground sprays. It might be a discovery stream or waterway for our development zone where it's going to be a little bit higher and kids can approach it. The goal here is really to provide a space for kids to approach water at their own comfort level, and they can choose to interact with it versus the water choosing to interact with them. The exploration zone, this is where things are going to be above a child's head, typically even above an adult's head, and the water is going to be trickling down for them. This is going to be that next level of graduated risk. So when a child becomes comfortable in the discovery and development zones, they could then take that next step and choose to still go under the water. The water is not going to be coming at them, but they can actually submerge their whole bodies into the water, such as going through the arches and things like that. And then the adventure zone, this is where the really big adventures come into play, like our large dumping buckets, water cannons that are very unpredictable. Kids may or may not get wet in this space, whether they want to or not. So when you approach this area, you're already going to be able to observe that the water is going to be moving in different patterns, maybe a little bit more erratically, and children can then choose whether or not they want to approach these spaces. So how do we take each of these zones and make sure that we're designing them for both inclusive play as well as providing elements of risky play in each of the spaces? So here's some great examples of the development and discovery zones. And you can see here, we do have the different ground level sprays that you can see the little girls playing with, and the water tables, our tide pools. And this is all great examples of what kids can approach and choose to interact with the water. Is what's nice about this is the element of risk is graduated from kids playing with that really low flow ground spray to something that might be more waist level or head level, being able to change the direction of the water that is coming through and that they're interacting with. So really providing that element of graduated risk. When you're done with playing with just a ground spray, you can move on to something a little bit more exciting. The other nice thing is we do design these at the proper heights and ability and accessibility levels for kids that might have to use a wheelchair to move around the space. All of our ground sprays are flush to ground, so you can roll over them if you need to, you can crawl over them and things like that, so that you have a lot of access to this area as well. And then the exploration zone, as I had said, these are going to be spaces where things are above your head. We still want to make sure that they are completely inclusive and accessible to all children, regardless of how they move around the splash pad. So you could see, for example, the arches that we have here. Those are both wide enough as well as tall enough for somebody that needs to Either use a mobility device to move around the splash pad, or maybe you are a toddler that wants to bring your mom or dad through there because you think it's going to be hysterical when they get completely wet as well. They're going to be tall enough for most adults to go through as well. And then an example like our rain cap, this is another great example to children that can disappear behind the water falling down over this. And if you are, again, using a device to move around, or if you're a toddler that's going to be running underneath it, you can completely submerge yourself in this space and get wet. The risk here for children that might not be as comfortable with water, maybe you're a child that's never experienced even going in a shower before. This could be your next level of having water come down on your head that you've never even felt before. So it is providing that next level of graduated risk. And then the adventure zone. I know a lot of times you start to see like adventure zone and these big, large, dumping buckets, and you immediately think this can't be an inclusive space. Or you see an activity tower and you think, how is that going to be inclusive for my child that might not be able to navigate, play structures and things like that. So we do definitely make sure that our adventure zone is inclusive for all children. And there's nowhere out there that kids are, deemed to, just because I happen to have to use a wheelchair means that I don't want to go under the mega soaker. I think that that is something that we need to remove from our mindsets, because they want to explore and play in these places just as much as every other child or human that is using this space. And then even if we do have an activity tower, being able to provide different ways for them to access the slides, either through ADA transfer stations or building in ramps or natural elevations to get them up to the deck where they can go down the slide, are all options that we can do within this adventure zone space. And then providing that competitive play. Our water cannons are accessible and at the right height. On the entry slide, you saw somebody that was in a device that was actually competing with one of their friends to see who they can spray and how they can get through. So the adventure zone is both the highest risk element that you will see within the splash pad, as well as a very inclusive space. So this is just a great recap of combining sort of all of those different terms and features that both Marissa and I have covered in inclusive play as well as risky play, and overlapping where a lot of these elements and features really do apply to both. So ground sprays really truly are both an inclusive play experience as well as a risky play experience, as well as, our tipping buckets and our rain cap. Again, it's just making sure that we apply them in a way that is accessible as well as risky for kids based on their comfort levels. So now we're going to take a quick look at a couple of project examples for you. I am going to start with one that is here in California called Diversity Park. And this was a smaller splash pad. As you can see, it's all ground level sprays. So really trying to find a way to include risk within a ground level spray only splash pad is really ideal here. And you can see that there's a lot of etching that goes around here. So the main part of this project that the community wanted was really to celebrate the inclusivity of the city of Walnut. It is in their mission statement to make sure that they include all of their community members of all the diverse backgrounds, and they really wanted to capture that within this small splash pad space that was part of a larger park that they experienced. And they did that in a couple of different ways. For some reason, there we go. They did that by putting different murals into the seat walls, and they actually engaged their local community to help design these and install them. They worked closely with the mayor and the committee that oversaw the Black History Month celebrations within this community, and had their input and their design work on a lot of the murals that they did on the seat walls. And then you'll see throughout the space, they also did a lot of etching, and they have about 12 different statements that the city goes by, such as we are diverse, we are of color, we are of whatever. And they etched those all along the splash pad as well to really incorporate the entire community and what they embraced. And then when it came to the design aspects, to make sure that they included the graduated risk throughout the space, they included the low-level ground sprays, such as our little monsters and tulips, as well as our team effects, where if you stand on one, the water is going to be affected by another. So they really did make an attempt to make sure that they included both an inclusive perspective as well as the risk perspective for a nice small space for kids to come and play with. I had the pleasure of visiting the space about 2 months ago in the height of summer, and there was probably 15 kids playing around here. And that is exactly what just makes our hearts happy for when we're designing these spaces. And now I am going to turn it over to Marissa to talk about her project.
Thank you. Okay, so my project showcase is Commerce City Park in Commerce, Texas. It's in my neck of the woods, as I like to say. It's an amazing project that just really transformed the city. You know, this project came about when the city closed their neighborhood pool due to its age and maintenance reasons. They found that they were in need of an inclusive space with engaging activities for all ages and abilities that could really just bring the community together. So the design is made up of 3 rings, one for that discovery development zone, one for the exploration, and one for the adventure zone, as Jen touched on. And, you know, it has this centralized middle area for the caretakers to observe and have sightlines of all areas. So this is inclusive and risky because kids can pick or naturally be drawn to one of these rings and one of these areas and have a variety of different play features that they can be risky with, or they can explore out into this next zone and push their boundaries. And they included seating at these 3 rings and in the center, covering all the zones, and then the center as well. You are able to sit in comfortable seating and also be covered in shade, which is really important here in Texas in the summer, as we know. So that just includes that inclusive aspect and that comfort for the kids. They also chose a variety of products with different water textures for comfortability and different height levels. So whichever kid, if they're on crutches or if they're 3-year-olds or 10-year-olds or in a wheelchair, you know, whatever height they're able to reach at, they have that feature for them. Also, it's really sensory rich play. So kids can really choose their own risks. It's also 0 depth and easily accessible with 4 pathways leading to the design. So they were just really able to achieve those 7 principles of universal design here and also incorporate risky play for all ages and abilities.
Nice job, guys, on examples of these. This is another one, and you can see this is a large splash pad. This project embodies several inclusive and risky play opportunities. It's in Mexico, in Mérida, in the Mexican state of Yucatan. It's a bustling city. There's rich culture, vibrant energy, tons of activities to do around the city, but they had one essential element that was missing from the community, and it was a communal space where children of all ages and abilities could beat the heat, kind of like Marissa said in Texas. Down in Mexico during the summer, they've got some heat, and they needed a safe and interactive and inclusive environment. So the Waterplay team worked with the government to focus on creating this an inclusive splash pad, but we also wanted to make sure that there were some risky elements, safe risky elements in here. So the Waterplay team drafted a comprehensive proposal, outlined all the different play opportunities with this design, what features were inclusive, safety measures in place, like we talked about the 0 depth area, risky play opportunities, and the community benefits. And, you know, the community goal really was that inclusive spot for all these kids to play in, and this definitely hits it. You can see all the different elements that both Jen and Marissa have talked about today. You know, going through the arches, that's a risk for some kids. Some of the ground, you know, sprays, many of these kids hadn't had a splash pad, you know, entertainment in their area before. So, you know, it doesn't matter the age. It's when a child hasn't done something before that is risky to them. So you can see a lot of different things climbing up. We talked about that, the fast sliding, the dumping buckets. So it's really a great example to bring together all of these great concepts that both Jen and Marissa have talked about today. I want to make sure that everybody knows we have a ton of CEUs that we can do for you. We have more if you want to talk about the importance of failure in play, which is a great thing. We talk about risky play with kids. Failure is also very important. Marissa talked a little bit about helicopter parenting and why that's not good. We don't allow kids to fail today, and that's a big mistake. So we can talk a little bit more about that in the CEU, play and curiosity cycle, free play in a controlled world, which is definitely another hot topic right now, and one of the reasons that we have such an anxious generation of kids. Universal splash pad design, inclusive play spaces, and how do we build these, spaces, these aquatic spaces? So we've got plenty of CEUs that we can offer to your staff. Any of us can provide those, so reach out. You can book your exclusive CEU session here if you're using the code there. Otherwise, just send one of us an email. I'm wondering if we have any questions, any kind of input that you have, maybe something that you've done in a design that incorporated both inclusive and risky play. I think it's very important that we all share this as a design community. I know there's a lot of different firms on here and maybe some competing firms, but I think we're all here for that same purpose of creating these spaces for kids. And I think it's in all our community's best interests if we share. These aren't, top secret. These are things that we can all do to provide, a better environment for our kids, include everybody, provide some risks, maybe decrease some of this anxiety that we're seeing in this generation. So do we have any questions, Jen M? We see that. Nothing? Fine, you guys have to have some kind of questions. No? Some examples? We do have some more masterclass sessions coming up. You are all registered for the next ones. What have we got coming up next, you guys? I believe our very own Jeff Scobie is next. Am I correct?
Yep. So Jeff will be speaking in November on Let's Get Technical. And then December we'll be having a collaborative design charrette led by mostly by Marissa on that one. I'll be her support.
So the Let's Get Technical obviously is a little spoof on the song Let's Get Physical. Jeff, are you going to be singing Let's Get Technical to us to introduce the presentation? Nobody wants that? I think, can we vote on that? I think that would be a lot of fun.
That would be fun. We could put that at the beginning of the presentation and just not tell him.
Nobody voted for my name in the question here, so no.
One person did.
One person did. And that was yourself, Jeff? I thought you didn't make mistakes, Jeff.
Only when they're fun.
Only when they're fun. Well, you guys, thank you so much for joining us again. Marissa and Jen, great presentation. Please reach out to either one of them or myself if you have, a project that's coming up, if you want to chat about this more. More voted for Jeff. Perfect. Good. Jeff, you're singing for us next time. Hey, thanks for the time, you guys. Anything else from the Design and Spec team here? Or we good? Awesome.
All good. Hopefully we'll see you guys next month.
See you next month. Have a fantastic day, everyone.